Magandang araw sa inyong lahat. Welcome once again to another pre-recorded video lecture for the subject NCM 107, Care of the Mother, the Child, and the Adolescent. Last meeting, we talked about the psychosexual and the psychosocial development theory by Sigmund Freud and Erik Erikson. And we have discovered that both of these theories explain why children behave and act the way that they do, because these theories are behavioral in nature. However, for this meeting, we will again be learning about two new theories which are also related to growth and development. So please bring out your handouts or your note-taking guide so that you can follow along our discussion together. Now, before we proceed to our main discussion, let us first look at the video objectives for today's session. After the end of this video, you, the students, will be able to become more familiarized with both the cognitive and the moral development theories by Jean Piaget and by Lawrence Kohlberg. So again, pakilabas na po ang inyong mga handouts so that we can continue our discussion together. We proceed to Piaget's cognitive development theory. Coming from the word cognitive, it means mental functioning. This theory was promulgated by Jean Piaget. He is a Swiss psychologist who introduced the concepts of cognitive development, or the way children learn and think. So basically, the cognitive development theory is a theory which is focused on how an individual becomes more intellectual or intelligent in nature, because it is focused on how children learn and think. This theory is categorized into 4 stages, which are called schema. So that's how Jean Piaget looks like, and again, he is the proponent of Piaget's cognitive development theory. Now, the first schema is what we call the sensory-motor schema, and it happens during the first 2 years of life. The child, during this period, discovers the world using his movements and his senses. That's the reason why this schema is called sensory-motor, because the world is being discovered by the child using his movement and his senses. Always remember that in your sensory-motor stage, it has several sub-stages. And the first sub-stage is the sensory-motor neonatal reflex. This happens on the first 28 days or the first month of life. So basically, what we are talking about here are neonates. Now, always remember that the neonate displays no intellectual or cognitive skill during this time. Wala pong bata, neonate, na sasabihin natin na, ay, magaling na, natututo na siya. Hindi po ganun yun. The neonate displays no intellect or cognitive skill. Hindi pa po nag-iisip yung bata. And the behavior of the child is entirely reflexive. Meaning, there is little to no cognitive or mental skill that is necessary to guide the actions of the neonate. Hindi po alam ng neonate yung ginagawa niya during this time. So sir, bakit siya umiiyak kung gutom siya? Bakit siya umiiyak kung nakatae siya? Always remember that the actions of the child are highly reflexive, and they are just due to the survival mode of the child. Hindi kailangang mag-isip ng bata para gawin niya tong mga bagay na to. Because crying, fuzzing, sleeping, and sucking are mainly automatic movements that are for the survival of the child. It does not need any thinking or cognitive ability. That's your sensory neonatal reflex. We proceed to the second substage, which is the primary circular reaction schema, and it happens on the first 4 months of life. According to the primary circular reaction schema, knowledge is attained by the infant through repetition of behaviors that are occurring within the body by accident. Anong ibig sabihin nito? Remember that the infant, a good example of this is the infant sucking his hand. The child accidentally puts his finger in his mouth and then he sucks on it. Tapos, na-realize niya, wow, ang sarap pala ng sensation when I am sucking my thumb. So because of that, the behavior is repeated. So because of that accident that happened within the body of the child will repeat that behavior. So alam na ng bata na ay, ang sarap palang mag-thumb suck. So what will happen? During the next day, magsasak yan ulit ng thumb niya kasi alam na niya that the feeling of sucking is gratifying. So again, that's primary circular reaction schema. It is an accident which occurs within the body and the child finds it pleasurable. Therefore, the behavior becomes repeated. Kaya nakakakita tayo ng mga batang gustong-gustong nag-thumb suck or gustong-gustong kinakagat yung unan pag first 4 months pa lang because that is the primary circular reaction schema. Alam na nila kung ano ang satisfying. Next, we also have your substage 3, which is the secondary circular reaction schema. And it happens on the 4th month up to the 8th month of life. Dito naman po, the knowledge which is attained is from an activity that is separate from the body of the child. Excuse me. Meaning, for example, a child is playing inside the crib and then the child accidentally hits the maracas or the rattle. And then the maracas sounded, naguni, deji maracas nga nasa gitna. The child realized, wow, the maracas sounded when I hit it. Therefore, I will repeat hitting it. So, as you can see, the behavior of the child is repeated and the maracas is separate from the body. And the child accidentally hit it on the first time. He found it pleasurable. Therefore, repeat niya yung behavior. So what happens? Natuto na yung bata. Sabi niya, wow, pag meron palang maracas, tumutunog yan. So what will happen? The next day, pagkakita ng bata sa maracas, papatunugin niya ulit. That is how the 4 to 8 month old child learns during the secondary circular reaction schema. Always remember that during this stage, there is also the concept of object permanence. It means that objects still continue to exist even though they are out of sight or changed in some ways. So basically, yung peekaboo is a sign na meron ng object permanence, yung isang bata. Now, always remember that your object permanence also lays the foundation of trust and it is the milestone of sensory motor. So, yung object permanence natin, yung bata kahit hindi na niya nakikita yung isang object, alam niyang nandun pa rin yun. That's what we call object permanence. So, like I said, that's primary circular reaction schema. An accident occurring within the body, the child finds it pleasurable. What happens? The child repeats the behavior. We also have the secondary circular reaction schema. The accident occurs separate from the body. The child finds it pleasurable. Therefore, the behavior is repeated. So that's secondary circular reaction schema. We also have substage 4, which is the coordination of secondary reaction schema. Ang ibig sabihin nito, infants already begin to demonstrate goal-directed behavior. Kung kanina po, puro lamang po by accident ang ginagawa ng bata, dito naman sa coordination of secondary reaction schema, the child already has a goal in mind. So, example, the infant sees the mobile. So, yung nakasabit, ang tawag po dyan, mobile. The infant hits the mobile because he wants it to sound. Kasi nga alam na niya na pag may mga bagay siyang hinihit, tumutunog. So lahat ng mga yan, ihihit niya. Okay? Hahampasin niya. Ano kaya ang sound pag hinit ko yung monkey? Ano kaya yung sound pag hinit ko yung pineapple? That is already what is happening to the brain of the child if he or she is under the coordination of the secondary reaction schema. Next, we also have substage 5, which is what we call the tertiary reaction, circular reaction schema. And this happens during the first year up to the 18th month. Dito po, ang tawag natin sa mga toddlers who are 1 year and 1.5 years old ay little scientists because the child usually does trial and error to discover new characteristics of objects. So for example, meron siyang hawak na bola, na rubber. Ibabato niya yan. Why? Because the child wants to know the characteristics of the ball. Magbabounce ba to or hindi? Kunwari meron siyang hawak na cellphone, ibabato niya yan. Magbabounce din ba ito katulad ng bolang hinagis ko kanina or hindi? Meron siyang hawak na plato, ibabato niya yan. Why? Because he is trying to look at the characteristics of an object via trial and error. And we also have substage number 6, which is the beginning of representational thought, or that happens during 18th month to the 24th month. During this stage, the toddler now has a basic understanding about the world. Now, sa substage 6 po, the beginning of representational thought na sinabi natin kaninang it happens during the 18th to 24th month, yung bata, he can also use mental strategies already to solve a problem. Kasi ito, magdadalawang taong gulang na siya. So, using mental strategies to solve a problem, the child is able to think through an action or mentally project a solution to a problem. For example, you have this child here. She is playing with a toy robot which is moving forward. And then yung toy robot na yon pumunta sa ilalim ng lamesa. Do you expect that the 2-year-old will also go under the table? Hindi na po. Kaya na niyang i-project yung solution to the problem. Sasabihin niyan, lalabas din naman itong robot na to sa kabila ng lamesa, kaya hindi ko na siya susundan sa ilalim ng lamesa. What I will do is I will just run towards the other part of the table and wait for the robot there. Ganun po ang ibig sabihin ng mentally projecting a solution to the problem. So kaya na pong gawin ng 2-year-old yang bagay na yan. Now, during your substage 6, very rampant din po at common ang echolalia and echopraxia. When we say echolalia, a child is able to remember something that he or she heard days before and repeats it. Kaya nga po yung mga bata, gustong-gusto nila natin silang pinagsasalita ng mga gago ko naman. Ginagawa natin yun, di ba? And then they will try to repeat what you are saying. Basically, that is what we call echolalia. They are remembering something that they heard. And then they will also repeat it. Again, that's called echolalia. It is common during 18th to the 24th month of life. Same is true po with echopraxia. When we say echopraxia, it is the ability to remember something that has been seen days before and then repeating it. So, kunwari, tung paemun ni Mamang Moon, tung paemun labakemun. The child saw that. What will the child do? The child will also do that action. Kasi nga po natututo na siya by using his senses. Dito po sa substage number 6, beginning of representational thought. Now, like I said a while ago, ang concluding na skill po ng isang bata in the sensory motor stage is what we call object permanence. It is a critical milestone during the sensory motor period and it is the development of object permanence. So sabi dito, a child who already has object permanence ay naniniwala na kahit hindi na nakikita yung isang bagay, nandoon pa rin yun. And because of that, how can we test na merong object permanence yung bata? You play peek-a-boo. Or in Ilocano, tiba. That is how you determine object permanence. We also proceed to the next schema, which we call the pre-operational schema. It is the second stage in Piaget's theory of cognitive development, and it begins at the year 2 to 7. During this stage, children are thinking at a symbolic level but are not yet using cognitive operations. Dito po, marunong nang gumamit ng symbols or symbolisms or representations yung isang 2 to 7-year-old kid. Now, kaya siya tinawag na pre-operational because the child cannot yet use logic or transform, combine, or separate ideas. Kaya siya tinawag na pre-operational, meaning before logic. So, let's have an example. Ang pinaka-common na landmark or criteria natin for us to say that the child is already in the pre-operational schema is the use of symbolic representation. And this is very common during the 2nd to the 3rd year of life. When we say symbolic representation, it is the ability to make one thing, a word or an object, stand for something other than itself. For example, sa picture na nakikita natin dito, the kid is riding a broomstick and the kid calls it a horse. That's a symbolic representation. Ibig sabihin, the child is already able to use symbols to represent an object. So that's one landmark for your pre-operational schema, what we call symbolic representation. We also have number 2, which is intuitive thought. It is also known as centering. Dito po, children look at something and center only to one characteristic of something. This intuitive thought will lead them to have poor decision or poor judgment. Bakit? Example po dito, a child is taking a medicine that is bitter. So yung bata, pinainom mo ng gamot and then mapait pala yung gamot na yon. Therefore, the child will not like to drink any medicine anymore. Nagkasakit ulit siya. You gave him another medicine. Pero this time, orange naman ang flavor ng medicine na yon. What will the child say? Sasabihin niya, ayoko, mapait. Why? Because the child looked at something and they only center on that specific characteristic. Therefore, yung judgment niya, hindi na maganda. Kahit sabihin mo sa kanya na, or strawberry flavor to, iba yung ininom mo kagabi. Hindi niya yan iinumin. Why? Kasi nga, nag-centering na siya. Meron na siyang intuitive thought. Alam niya, mapait pa rin kahit anong klaseng gamot yung ibigay mo. Kasi nga, mapait yung unang binigay mo. Alright? So that is the basis when they say, first impressions last. Dito po yun, sa intuitive thought. Okay? Pero ginagawa yan lang yun usually ng 2 to 3 years old individuals. Alright. Another substage on your pre-operational schema is what we call egocentrism. And it refers to the child's inability to see the situation from another person's point of view. Ibig sabihin dito, hindi maintindihan ng bata kung bakit ayaw mo sa isang bagay. Gustong-gusto niya yon. Okay? So according to Piaget, the egocentric child assumes that the other person sees, hears, and feels exactly the same way that they do. Kunwari, example natin, Kid A is forcing Kid B to like his favorite color, na color red. Dedo yan iti pagbadom color red, nagmayat. Ipapilit na. Bakit niya ginagawa yon? Kasi ang feeling niya, Kung ano yung nararamdaman niya, kung ano yung nakikita niya, yun din yung nakikita ng ibang tao. That's the reason why children, toddlers will hate you when they say, nagpangit deta ay ayam mo. Because hindi nila maintindihan kung bakit ang pangit ng tingin mo sa laruan niya, pero para sa kanya, ang ganda-ganda naman ng laruan. That is what we call egocentrism. They are not able to understand the other people's viewpoint. We also have what we call symbolic play. And toddlers will, under the pre-operational schema, will now engage in creating their own imaginary world using the power of their intellect. So nag-grow na yung imagination ng isang bata. During this symbolic play, egocentrism starts to decline. Nawawala na po yung egocentrism ng bata. Naiintindihan na nila that there are other individuals also who may have different opinion, different perspectives, and children will begin to enjoy the participation of another child in their imaginary games. Kunwari, magkakaroon sila ng Power Rangers. Yung isa sasabihin niya, pinakamaganda si Yellow. So, pag egocentric yung isang bata, sasabihin niya, hindi, mas maganda si Pink. Ganon siya. Pero since wala na po yung egocentrism during the symbolic play, they are able already to participate with one another, respecting the opinion or likes of other individuals. So that is another landmark in your pre-operational schema. Now, children under pre-operational schema will also have a sense of animism. And when we say animism, this is the belief that inanimate objects such as toys and teddy bears are alive and have human feelings, purpose, and intention. So as you can see, a child here is trying to cure and is talking to a teddy bear. Why? Because he believes that the teddy bear is sick and the teddy bear needs attention. Animism po ang tawag natin dyan. Inanimate objects, they think, have lives. Animism. Now, if a child is 4 to 5 years old, for them, everything is alive. Pag siya naman ay naging 5 to 7 years old na, they realize that only the ones that are moving are alive. So yung mga laruang robot, laruang mga gumagalaw na debaterya, para sa kanila buhay din yun. And then, when they are already 7 to 9 years old, they realize that only the ones that move spontaneously are alive. Yung mga gumagalaw lang na kahit hindi mo inoon or inaandar, yun lang para sa kanila ang buhay. But if the child is already 9 to 12 years old, they realize that only plants and animals and human beings are alive. Next, still under the concept of pre-operational schema, we also have what we call artificialism. And this is the belief that certain aspects of the environment are manufactured by people. So dito po, the child does not yet understand how the world began. Hindi niya alam kung bakit may mga clouds, hindi niya alam kung bakit umuulan, gusto niyang malaman kung bakit may sun. That is what we call artificialism. So example, the child believes that the thunder, kulog, or guruod in Ilocano, is created by people in the heavens who are banging the drums very loudly. Meron din yung mga iba, ang akala nila pag merong thunder, umuutot yung mga tao sa taas. That is what we call artificialism. The belief that certain aspects of the environment are manufactured by people. We also have the term irreversibility. And it is a stage in early child development in which a child falsely believes that actions cannot be reversed or undone. For example, yung bata, nakita niya na yung balon niya na pinaglalaruan mo ay na-deflate. Or yung bola, kunwari, tinanggal mo yung hangin. Iiyak yung bata. Yung 3-year-old child, iiyak yan. Why? Because he understands that the ball can not be easily inflated. Okay? So, sabi niya, sinira mo na yung bola ko, dinadail mo din yung bola ko, kunanadeta. Why? Because for him, that action cannot be reversed anymore. So, sabi dito, if a 3-year-old boy sees someone deflate a ball, he will not understand that that ball can easily be inflated again. Alright? So, yun po yung irreversibility. Pag ginawa mo na yung isang bagay, hindi mo na siya pwedeng ibalik sa dati. So, that's the concept of a 3-year-old boy. Now, we also have the concrete operational schema, and this is usually developed during 7th to the 11th year of life. The child in the concrete operational schema starts to develop organized and rational thinking, and the child is now mature enough to use logic or logical thought or operations. So, tumalino na yung bata dito. So, he can already use logic or operations. Now, we have the term conservation. This happens during the concrete operational schema. And ano tong skill na to? This refers to a logical thinking ability that allows a person to determine that a certain quantity will remain the same despite the adjustment of the container, the shape, or the appearance. Sige, simplify natin ito using this example. Which one has more water? Dito po, sa experiment na ito, Jean Piaget presented one kid with 2 glasses of water na pareho ang level. So alam ng bata na pareho lang po ang laman ng basong mga ito. Kasi magkapareho din sila ng tangkad. And then what did they do? The other glass, the contents of the other glass was placed on the another glass which is taller. And then they asked again, which one has more water? The child automatically thinks na kung ano yung mas matangkad, yun yung mas madami. And pag yun yung sinagot ng bata, pag sinabi ng bata, this taller glass has more water, ang ibig sabihin niyan, the child has not yet developed conservation. Bakit? Kasi nga po ang conservation is the ability to allow you to determine that certain quantities will remain the same despite the adjustment in the container, the shape, or the size. So, pag yung bata, tumanda na siya, tanungin mo ulit, gawin mo ulit tong activity na ito, and then tanungin mo, which one has more water? Pag sinabi niya, pareho lang sila. That means that the child already has attained a sense of conservation. Kasi naiintindihan na po niya yung concept ng conservation. Next, we also have the term classification. It is the ability to identify the properties of categories, to relate categories or classes to one another, and to use categorical information to solve problems. I have a pinsan before. I have a cousin na favorite niya ang kangkong. And then, every time na pinapakain siya ng green leafy vegetable, she says, wow, kangkong. So, kumakain siya ng kangkong every now and then. Kangkong lahat ng green leafy vegetable. But then, kahit na petchay yung kinakain niya, kahit na malunggay yung kinakain niya, she says, it's kangkong. Kangkong. Pero nung tumanda siya, she was already able to develop a sense of classification. Anong ibig sabihin nito? Na hindi lang pala kangkong ang green leafy vegetable sa mundo. Meron ding mga talbos ng kamote. And then tinanong ko siya, anong ulam mo? And she said, I'm eating talbos ng kamote. So, hindi na lang po kangkong alang-alam niya. So, that's what we call classification. It is the ability to identify the properties of categories and to relate these categories to one another. Next, we also have the concept of seriation. It is also known as logical order. This is a cognitive skill which is developed during the 7th to 11th year of life, which involves the ability to mentally arrange items along a quantifiable dimension such as height or weight. So dito po, kayang-kaya na pong i-arrange nung bata yung kanyang mga toys from biggest to smallest. Why? Because the child already has developed the sense of seriation. Kaya na niyang gawin yun pagtingin pa lamang niya. But you ask that activity to be performed by a 2-year-old child, hindi niya kayang gawin. Also, under concrete operational schema, we also have inductive reasoning. And it is the mental activity using existing knowledge to generate new knowledge that may not be true. Dito po sa inductive reasoning, we base our knowledge on our personal experiences. Malalaman natin mamaya ito. Inductive reasoning is required whenever people need to fill gaps in their knowledge with best guesses about the state of the world. Dito po sa inductive reasoning, it involves the use of bottom-up logic. This means that knowledge or understanding can be formed from specific facts which are from the bottom, which are based on your experiences, to general idea. Example, a child sees 3 green snakes. So that's the general, that's the specific idea. And then the child will automatically assume, lahat pala ng mga ahas ay kulay green. Kasi lahat ng mga nakita ko na ahas ay color green na. Tama po ba? Another example, kunwari, nanood siya ng pelikula. And then, yung madre doon ay masungit tapos naging aswang at the end of the night. During the evening, I should say. And then, nanood ulit siya ng isang pelikula. Again, ganun ulit yung theme. Yung madre, masungit, and then pagkatapos ng gabi, ay pagkatapos ng araw, nagiging aswang. What happens? The child automatically thinks na lahat ng madre ay nagiging aswang. That's the bottom-up logic. Based on experience, inassume niya na lahat-lahat ay ganun din. Alright? So that is what we call inductive reasoning. Sige, kunwari, you are still in your inductive reasoning. Niloko ka ng isang lalaking may braces. Next boyfriend mo, meron ulit braces. Niloko ka ulit. And then you automatically assume lahat ng mga lalaking may braces, manloloko. Okay? So that's what we call inductive reasoning. Sabi dito, they are just best guesses, but they may be or may not be true. Next, we also have the formal operational schema, which happens after the 12th year onwards. According to Jean Piaget, this is the highest form of cognitive development. The formal operational stage is the 4th and the final stage in Piaget's theory, and it begins at approximately 11 to 12 years of age and continues towards adulthood. So pag kayo ay more than 12 years old na, ang ginagamit nyo ng way of thinking is what we call the formal operational schema. At ano yung mga cognitive skills na naa-attain nyo when you are already in this stage? You have the abstract reasoning. It is the formal operational stage which is characterized by the ability to formulate hypotheses and then systematically test them to arrive at an answer to a problem. Nag-try nyo na bang nag-take ng exam ng ganito? Yung may mga box and then you guess kung ano yung susunod na itsura ng item na yon? That is what we call the abstract reasoning test. when you take that test, you formulate a hypothesis and then you test its correctness. So pag kaya mong sagutan yung mga bagay na yan, if these things make sense to you, then that means that you have already attained a level of abstract reasoning. And then we also, when you are on your formal operational schema, you also use the deductive reasoning. And this is sometimes referred to as the top-down logic. Ito po yung kabaliktaran ng inductive reasoning. This is the higher, better way of thinking. This means that knowledge or understanding can be deduced from a general idea to form a specific fact. So pag yung inductive reasoning po ay bottom-up, ito naman po, top-down approach. Alright. Example. There is a research which says all midwifery and nursing students hate mathematics. That's a general idea. Diane is a midwifery student. Therefore, you think immediately that Diane also hates math. Simple logic. Tama po ba? That is what we call deductive reasoning. From a general idea, you deduced it and you came up with a specific fact. Another example, according to research, people with braces often have bad breath. That's a general idea. You have braces. Therefore, you automatically assume that you will have bad breath. So that's from a general idea down to a specific fact. That is what we call deductive reasoning. So again, let's have a review of Piaget's cognitive development theory. From birth to 2 years old, it's the sensory motor stage. From 2 to 7 years old, it's pre-operational stage. But if the child is already on the 7th to the 11th year of life, that's already the concrete operational stage. And then for formal operational stage, it happens 12 years and above.
Teka lang, wait. Para malaman ko talaga kung kayo ay nakikinig pa rin sa akin ngayon sa ating discussion, mag-attendance check muna tayo. And para naman mas interesting ang ating checking of attendance for today's video, what we are going to do is you will be sending a voice message in our group chat. So ang gagawin natin is magre-record tayo ng pinaka-malupit na linyahan ng beast mode nyong mga nanay or tatay or guardian kapag sila ay nagagalit sa inyo. I'll go first. Dawat ka lang nga dawat ti kwarta, apanyatib mo magtaktak-kinak ti kwarta. Yan yung linyahan ng nanay ko kapag ako ay umihingi sa kanya ng pera. Kayo, anong mga sinasabi ng mga nanay at tatay nyo sa inyo kapag sila ay nagagalit? Palupitan dapat ng sagot ha. That is my mode of checking your attendance. Para naman alam ko na kayo'y nandyan pa na nakikinig sa akin. Alright. With that being said, let's proceed to the next part of our lesson.
We also talk about Lawrence Kohlberg's moral development theory. Lawrence Kohlberg is a psychologist who studied the reasoning ability of boys, and he based his study on Piaget's theory. His theory focused not on the way children learn and think, but on how they gain knowledge of what is right from what is wrong, or what we call moral reasoning. Kung si Piaget po, inaral niya kung paano tumatalino yung isang bata, si Lawrence Kohlberg naman, inaral niya kung paano nagkakaroon ng sense of morality yung isang individual. He came up with his theory called the theory of moral development. And it proposes an explanation as to how individuals gain a sense of what is right and what is wrong. Lawrence Kohlberg divided his theory into three: the pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional stage. Let us have a look at level 1, pre-conventional stage. During this stage, the child's sense of morality is externally controlled. Anong ibig sabihin nito? Alam daw ng bata yung tama sa hindi because of the external environment. Children accept and believe the rules of authority figures such as the parents and teachers, and they judge an action based on its consequences. Let's start with stage 1, which is obedience and punishment orientation, and this is usually happening during infancy. This stage focuses on the child's desire to obey rules and avoid being punished. For example, an action is perceived by the infant as morally wrong because the wrongdoer is punished. The worse the punishment for the act, the more bad the act is perceived to be. Kunwari yung isang bata, pinaglalaroan niya yung pagkain niya at pinalo mo yung batang yon. The child will automatically think that what he is doing is bad. And then, kunwari yung bata, pinaglalaroan niya yung pagkain niya, binato din niya yung mga kubyertos niya, binasag niya yung mga pinggan, ang lakas ng palo na binigay ng nanay. The child will automatically say, "Oh, what I did was worse than before." Kasi sabi dito, the worse the punishment for the act, the more bad the act is perceived by the infant. Alright? Kaya siya tinawag na obedience and punishment orientation. So let's simplify it. Ang nasa isip ng infant, I will do good so that I will not get punished. Kaya siya tinawag na obedience and punishment orientation. So what do we do? As midwives, the implication of this is that the punishments that are given to the child for their mistake should not be severe or traumatizing. Nakabasag na siya ng pinggan, pinag-untog mo na siya sa pader. Hindi naman po ganun. Alright? So, pwedeng scolding lang or pwedeng a little slap lang on the hands para naman matuto, para alam niya kung ano yung tama sa mali. That is how we teach them during the obedience and punishment orientation. That's for infancy. Stage 2 is what we call instrumental orientation. And the right behavior is usually dictated by their best interest. Sabi ng bata, tatanungin niya, what do I get if I do the right thing? What's in it for me? Okay? The individual interest of the toddler is more important than the needs of other people. Anong ibig sabihin nito? The child will do good because he will gain something out of it. Kaya siya tinawag na instrumental orientation. The concern for others is not based on loyalty or intrinsic respect. Rather, ang iniisip ng bata, you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. Ang iniisip niya, gagawa ako ng mabuti, bigyan mo ako ng reward. That is the mentality of a toddler in the instrumental orientation phase. Now, let's have a simplified explanation of stage 2. I will do good so that I will get rewarded. That is instrumental orientation. Now, what is the nursing implication that we have to do? Always remember that the child should not only be rewarded with material things or monetary rewards. Hindi po pwedeng ganon. They should also be rewarded with compliments, pat in the back, or a good job para naman hindi po magmukhang pera yung bata paglaki. So that the child will not become materialistic. Para yung morality niya is not centered on what he gains rather than on what he gives. Next level is what we call the conventional stage. During the conventional level, an individual's sense of morality is tied on the personal and societal relationships. Dito po, napaka-importante sa preschooler yung relationship niya towards other people. Children continue to accept the rules of authority figures, but this is because they believe that it is necessary so that they can keep the positive relationship and societal order. Kaya nga pag yung bata sinabi mo, pag yung preschooler sinabi mo, iji ka hanggang kakayatan, hanggang kakayat, no kunam kumakanya na, the child will cry. Why? Because for the child, for that preschooler, it is very important to keep the relationship with that person. Alright? So we have stage 3 under conventional stage, and it's called the good boy, nice girl orientation. Dito po, children want approval of other people. Emphasis is placed on good behavior and people being nice to other people. So para sa kanila, being called nice or being called good is important. Children during this stage do good deeds not because they want to do the right thing, but because they want to be called nice or good. So simplify natin. During the good boy, nice girl orientation, ang sabi nila, I will do good so that people will call me good or nice. So that's stage 3 under conventional stage. We also have number 4, which is law and order orientation. The child blindly accepts the rules and convention because of their importance in maintaining a functioning society. For the individual, rules are seen as being the same for everyone, and obeying the rules by doing what one is supposed to do is seen as valuable and important. Dito po, para sa isang individual, yung law and order orientation, he thinks that it is our responsibility to follow all the rules. Kahit pa it doesn't make sense, we will follow it. That's for law and order orientation. So, simplified explanation nito, the child or that individual will think, I will do good so that I will not go to jail. So, lahat ng rules gusto niyang i-follow. He blindly follows and accepts the rules, even if they don't make sense. Because it is seen as something important for the society. So, according to Lawrence Kohlberg, the individual acknowledges the authority of the policemen and other disciples of law and order. The most active members of the society, karamihan sa atin po, we remain at this stage where morality is still predominantly dictated by an outside force. All right, so let's have a better look at a good example of the law and order orientation is the use of the quarantine pass. So some of the family members, even though they really don't understand the reason why we need to have one family member to have the quarantine pass, kahit hindi nila alam kung anong silbi nun, they will do it. Why? Because they think that following the rules is important. Another person will say, nay, social distancing tayo. Apa yan, o damagim ko makanyada. They don't know what to say. Hanggang mo, basta sumitim bagada. That's law and order orientation. Now, we also have level 3, which is the post-conventional stage. In the post-conventional stage, a person's sense of morality is defined in terms of more abstract principles and values. And people now believe that some of the laws that we have are unjust and should be changed or eliminated. So kung kanina po, sa conventional stage, ang importante sa atin ay we follow the rules. Dito po, we already have a sense of what laws are okay and what laws are needed to be changed. During the post-conventional stage, the individuals may disobey the rules that are inconsistent with their own principle. Kunwari, sa isang classroom, kailangan mong i-greet lahat ng tao according to your teacher, kahit pa-friend mo yon or hindi. But for you, ayaw mong nakikipagplastikan sa ibang tao. So what do? Do you follow the rules set by the teacher? Usually, some of the people will say, ayoko nga. Ayokong pansinin yan. Ayokong makipagplastikan. That is an example, a simple example of the post-conventional stage. you already begin to disobey rules which are inconsistent with your own principles. Hindi pasok sa prinsipyo mo, hindi mo gagawin kahit pa parte ng batas. People in this stage believe that human rights like life, liberty, justice are more important than any social conventions, rules, and regulations. So dito po, we already have a sense for us of what is more important. At kung yung mga law na meron tayo ay it is against the freedom of people, it is against life, it is against justice, then we do not believe in those laws. A good example of this also is the extrajudicial killing. There are people who are against extrajudicial killing, and I believe that they are under the post-conventional stage. Bakit? Kasi nga po, they believe that killing a person even without a trial, even without the court of law, is not good. And it's not part of human rights because it violates the right to life. So, post-conventional stage pang tawag natin doon, there are some law that do not make sense if they trample with life, liberty, and justice. Now, remember that not all people will reach the post-conventional stage. May mga iba po sa atin na 70 years old na pero nasa conventional stage pa rin, and that's perfectly okay. Example dito, people speaking up against injustices. Kunwari yung nanay mo, merong bata na binubugbog ng tatay, and then your mother who is already 50 years old, wala siyang imik. Wala siyang imik, hindi niya pinipigilan yung nambubugbog. That means that she is not yet on the post-conventional stage. Bakit? Kasi mas gusto niyang manahimik na lang muna kasi ayaw niyang pinapakialaman yung iba kasi because she still believes na pakialaman mo yung mga bagay na concerned ka. So again, law and order pa rin yung nasa isip niya, but not yet post-conventional stage. I hope that made sense. Now, under the post-conventional stage, we have stage 5, which is what we call social contract orientation. The person now starts to view the world as a place with different opinions, rights, and values, and should be mutually respected as unique to each community. For the person, under the post-conventional stage, laws that do not promote the general welfare should be changed when necessary to meet the greatest good for the greatest number of people. For example, we have the 4 Ps. There are people who think that 4 Ps should be discontinued kasi nga po, they think that it does not promote the general welfare. Hindi po lahat nakikinabang doon. And they actually are making sense. Kasi po, according to them, only a few people who are members of the 4 Ps are benefiting from it. So sabi dito, laws that do not promote the general welfare should be changed when necessary para po mas marami. The greatest good for the greatest number of people are met. Kaya nga po may mga taong nagrarally because they are lobbying or fighting for the change of law. Kasi nga ang importante sa kanila in the social contract orientation is the common good. Okay? So, simplified explanation natin ng social contract, I will do good for the sake of everyone. So, example dito is lobbying, kunwari, for unfair working conditions. Kunwari, you are a nurse or a midwife, and then the chief nurse said, dapat 12 hours kayong mag-duty, walang uuwi, hindi pwedeng mag-aral, ganito, ganyan, hindi pwedeng mag-masteral, hindi pwedeng ganito. And then you started speaking up, and then you said, ma'am, parang hindi naman po maganda yon, baka pwede po nating pag-usapan. That's already a social contract orientation because you are already starting to believe that the law set by the chief nurse is just good for the hospital and not for the greater good of the many. The last stage under Lawrence Kohlberg's moral development theory is the universal ethical principle orientation. According to the stage 6, In here, moral reasoning is based on abstract reasoning using the universal ethical principles. Dito po, our personal principles are more important than the laws that are promulgated by the disciples of law. Example, if a person already has a concrete ethical principle, they want to follow it. Kunwari, may isang tao or may isang professional na gusto niya, pinaghihirapan niya lahat ng kanyang mga awards na nare-receive, yung mga lahat ng merits niya. That hardworking individual has a principle na if I ask for it, I don't deserve it. Or if I ask for it, I don't want it. Kasi gusto niya, pinaghihirapan niya lahat ng mga bagay-bagay. Now, in that example, yun yung principle ng tao na yon. Now, here comes an individual who said, uy, kaya mo ta ipatangkakin ni Presidente tano may promote ka. So, with that opportunity, the person that we were talking about would say, ayoko, wag mong gagawin yon. Kasi, nasa prinsipyo ko na lahat dapat ng gusto ko ay pinaghihirapan ko. So, in that example, that person is already under the universal ethical principle orientation. Bakit po? Because he is relying on abstract reasoning and universal ethical principles to follow what he or she wants to do. Bakit? Kasi nung na-promote Beijing nga tao using the compadre system, masakit sa loob niya yun. Why? Kasi mas importante sa kanya yung na-finalo niya yung kanyang principle. So that is the stage 6, which is the universal ethical principle orientation.
And that concludes the first chapter for the subject NCM 107, Care of the Mother, the Child, and the Adolescent. Congratulations po at natapos na natin ang unang chapter ng ating lesson. However, it's time for me to check just how much you have learned in our lesson. So, I'm gonna be uploading your first quiz in our Google Classroom, and so please make sure to visit our Google Classroom once in a while so that you can comply with the requirements that I have set for this course. Again, maraming salamat for listening, and again, congratulations for finishing our first chapter. Enjoy the rest of the day, and like I always say, keep safe and please stay alive. Maraming salamat. See you next week.